Hello, 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 whatever day it is. Let's start in the United States of America or in Baltimore. When an architect crashed his car while suffering a diabetic reaction on the way home from Bible study class, state and county police pepper sprayed him in the face and clubbed him and tasered him to death, his wife claims in court. I was going to read that all to you, but you can read it yourself if you like. But I was just thinking that if anything like that happened over here in Pussy Europe, that wouldn't leave the front page of all the country's newspapers until the police were in prison for 1,000 years. Or something like that. Adam Smith and the Myth of Laissez-Faire by Gavin Kennedy. Follow the link if you want to read the whole of this. Let's be clear. Adam Smith did not use the words laissez-faire. Heard of Adam Smith? Yeah. Laissez-faire capitalism. Always. The free hand is Adam Smith and laissez-faire capitalism. No, it's not. Adam Smith did not use the words laissez-faire in anything that he wrote, published in his lifetime or posthumously, or in any student notes that have so far been found, or any reports of his lectures by those who attended them, John Miller, James Woodrow, Lord Buchan, John Stuart, etc., or by those who knew him intimately, such as Dugald Stewart, whose father was a student at Glasgow with Smith. We know that Smith knew of the use and meaning of laissez-faire from his close association with the physiocratic circle around Cuisenay. During the visit to Paris 1764-67, the fact that laissez-faire never entered his vocabulary, nor did an English translation, this has not prevented many communicators from seeking to use Smith's use of natural liberty as a synonym for laissez-faire. It was not the same thing. If you're in the slightest bit interested in that sort of thing, Smith wrote 2 books. Oh, I'm not going to go into it. He wrote 2 books. Do you know that? The second book is a lot more interesting than the first book. Did go that way around, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah. The second book on morality and ethics. Third link, it is almost as if Europe is trying to start a bank run. Rather impressively, the botched bailout of Spain's banks wasn't even the most incompetent thing Europe's officials did on Monday. That honour goes to the guys who admitted that they have talked about instituting capital controls if Greece actually does exit the Eurozone. Meaning Europe will prevent people from moving their money across national borders and perhaps even from withdrawing it from ATMs if Eurogeddon hits. This is in the Atlantic, so it's not just a total throwaway blog article. The first rule of capital controls is don't talk about capital controls. The second rule of capital controls is just do them. Secretly, talking about them beforehand only broadcasts to everyone in Europe's periphery that they should move their money to German banks as soon as possible, as otherwise their euros could soon turn into pesetas or lira. Of course, if people start pulling their money out of their home banks en masse, the only solution might be capital controls. In other words, talking about capital controls can set off a continental bank run that makes capital controls necessary. Yesterday was really weird. I told you about the silly people on the radio that I heard in the morning talking about how jolly good the bailout of Spanish banks were. By lunchtime, the meme had completely changed, and most all people were saying how jolly silly and rubbish the whole thing was. Weird. Note the date on this, we'll start with that, August 2009. Hot new Spanish model for banking. 2009. So long ago. Do you remember? There's a hot new Spanish model that has everyone in Europe going gaga. No, it's not a runway or swimsuit model. It's the Spain's banking model. The Bank of Spain forced Spanish banks to follow a very conservative banking model using what they called dynamic provisioning requirements. These requirements forced Spanish banks to build reserves during the good times. This left the banks with capital to draw upon, which is helping them survive the downturn. This is 2009. The Bank of Spain also restricted local banks from piling to mortgage securities, and Spain has a small credit card and commercial property market which limited risk exposure for the banks. But the banks did their part too. They focused on the retail market rather than the risky investment banking as their American counterparts did. This is the new hot model from Spain. Definitely offers profit opportunities for investors in the banking sector. Of course, if you listen to that, you've lost just about everything you've put into it. And note, Bankia. This is what the main bank that needs bailing out. They got the old kind of banks, local banks, building society type banks, because they were just corrupt and rubbish and obviously insolvent. They just bundled them all up into one rubbish bank called Bankia, and then floated Bankia on out, sold shares out on the market. But the market said, "Fuck off." So instead of going, "Ooh, sorry, yes, well, was a bit wild," they did television adverts and sold it to the Spanish people. The whole thing is just horribly, cruelly pathetic. And it's basic, it's corruption, it's mild but pervasive corruption between the old cajas, local government and state government. And, what are the core of Europe, the decent Dutch, Finnish and German people meant to do with that? Just keep giving them money, I suppose, like the Greeks. It's so difficult, right? Argentina. I thought I'd throw this in because the problem, the fuse big bangy bong, probably won't come from where we think it's going to come from, because they're jumping on these things and doing ludicrous things like the Bankia bailout, which is a bailout, not a bail-in, as I said yesterday. And that's corrupt as well. It's like Ireland, they could have grabbed the equity holders, although they were now the new people, the you and me, the people off the street that had seen the television adverts. But the subordinated debt, they could have been wiped out. And maybe it would have been better to wipe out the idiots that followed the television adverts as well. Wipe out equity and the subby debt holders. Bankrupt the whole thing, and then if it's really that bad, the big debt holders can take a thump up the sides of their head as well. Anyway, they didn't. They just, like Ireland, just threw the money in. Taxpayers' money, ultimately, of course it is. Taxpayers' money in Spain. Argentina's dollar deposits from individuals and non-government businesses fell to the lowest since April 2010 as President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner tightened controls on the exchange markets, capital controls. You try and put them in place, the money gets scared and squeezes out between your fingers and eventually gets out and causes you more trouble than you tried to stop. That's Argentina. India's 10-year bond yield 3 months low as RBI to buy debt. India's a problem. It's been kind of booming because it's been kind of booming, but it's got underlying pervasive corruption like Spain as well. And its institutions aren't really what you might call rock solid. There is a very good chance that India will blow, because it'll just do something incredibly stupidly wrong. It's big, so it'll have to really lumber into its wrongness, but there's a good chance that India can go incredibly wrong. India's benchmark 10-year bonds rose. The Reserve Bank of India will buy a maximum of 120 billion rupees, 2.2 billion of notes at auction tomorrow. It's got the potential for going wrong, India. This is the last one. From the Telegraph in the UK, the international think tank warned that the poor performance of the British pension companies could leave people retiring without enough to live comfortably. That's a joke anyway, but still, okay. Without enough to live comfortably. Everyone still thinks that they're going to retire on, I call it Volvo retirement, where you get a new Volvo every 2 years, and it's all chintz and 2 continental holidays in retirement. I don't think so. The OECD said that returns on money invested by pension companies on behalf of savers fell every year between 2001 and 2010 for the UK. Every other developed country, with the exception of the United States and Spain, saw some sort of an increase in the size of people's pension pots, including Chile, Portugal and Korea. They all invested and got some sort of positive return. United States, Spain and the UK got negative returns over that 10-year period. Pension companies in Britain invest a high proportion of their money in stocks and shares, equities, rather than government bonds. The credit crunch and subsequent falls in the value of shares, not stocks, have exerted major stresses on these private pension funds. It is a higher risk strategy going for equities as opposed to bonds, and there's been this very strange thing where things have gone wrong, so people have gone to bonds. The interest rate on bonds comes down, but actually the bonds that you've bought, if you're holding them, people will buy them off you at a higher rate. So buying bonds in 2000 has been not a bad strategy, and buying equities has not been that clever. It's just a very big question. What is the world going to do with these pensions? There's huge, technically, hypothetically huge, trillions and trillions of monies out there in pensions. What are they going to do with it to get a return? Returns just don't seem to be out there anymore. It's just you want a return of your money as opposed to return on your money. But they're banking on things like 7, 8, 9% per annum sort of return. And they ain't going to get it. They ain't going to get it. Right, that's it for today. Before I do my pathetic coughing. Bye.